I am pleased and excited to introduce our conversation for the evening. So please welcome to the stage journalist, educator, and author of the just published book, How to Raise Successful People, Esther Wojicicki.
Thank you.
Along with Fortune's Michal Lev-Ram.
Thank you.
Oh my God, these chairs are high. So thank you, Gina and Emoju, for setting the stage. Apparently, we can swear as much as we want to tonight.
For sure.
You guys were amazing, seriously. Okay, so just for starters, Susan, one of Esther's daughters, was supposed to join us tonight, as you guys might know, but she had to back out last minute, unfortunately, because she's sick. So we will get to talk about Susan's childhood without her here to defend herself.
That
so
gives me lots of opportunity
all good.
To say everything.
We want to hear about the time she ran over a fire hydrant while you were teaching her to drive.
Oh.
Did that happen?
That was Janet.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Well, we can talk about that too.
But yes, she did some things like that as well. So.
Okay.
Yes.
We all have our skeletons. So just you know, we got a little bit of an introduction to you, and you have such an amazing background and profile, and of course have raised these three very successful people who happen to be women: Susan Wojicicki, the CEO of YouTube, Ann Wojicicki, the CEO, co-founder, founder or co-founder?
Co-founder.
Co-founder of 23andMe, and Janet is an epidemiologist at UCSF.
Right.
Okay. So not bad. My kid has risen to the level of putting avocado on his head at this point, but
that'll work. To start.
Yes. He's got a bright future. But you also, interestingly, had a front row seat to a lot of the growth in Silicon Valley, partly because of your early family relationships with Google. So I want to talk about, obviously, raising successful people in leadership, but also through the lens of technology and how that both helps and hinders some of your approach to parenting and to educating. So maybe we can start with just taking a step back. Your own childhood was very different from the one that your daughters had. Can you just kind of give us a summary of sort of how you would characterize your childhood and how you did very eloquently in your book?
Well, my childhood was, I guess, a reflection of the way people parented in the 1950s. So I don't know if you ever remember that, spare the rod, spoil the child. Yes, well, they subscribed to that. And so I had a father that believed in, not sparing the rod. And that created a few problems for me. I also grew up in a family, we didn't have very much money. And that was primarily because he was an artist. And you know how much money artists earn in general, and he wasn't Picasso. So there was a little bit of a problem. And my mom didn't work. My parents are Russian Jewish immigrants. And so my father was the breadwinner, and my mom was basically the homemaker. And neither one of them had a high school degree. So I was kind of the first generation to go to college. Part of the reason that, I had some difficulties going to college as well, because I don't know if you know anything about Orthodox Jewish religion, but they believe that the woman's role is to have more children. And so I think maybe you might be familiar with it, or some people here, yes. And so I rebelled. I was like, nope, not for me. I wanted to go to college. And so fortunately, UC Berkeley gave me a scholarship. And I only applied to one school, knowing nothing, right? And I was like, oh, hopefully I get into this place. And at that point, the fact that I did not follow the family's wishes and traditions, they cut me off financially. So I had to do it by myself. I worked a lot. I struggled through. I actually went through Berkeley in 3 years. Turns out you can do that. And the reason I did it is because I was so poor. The faster I get through, the sooner I can earn some money. And so, I took a lot of classes at once. Like the typical student takes 15 units, and I took 21. But you can do it. So that's what, that was basically it. But I just want to say, I wanted to make sure when I had children that they would have a very different childhood. Mm-hmm. And so that was my goal.
And you also, you thought differently from a young age and rebelled, but you also had a very traumatic experience, the loss of your brother, that really altered the way you think as well. Can you talk about that?
So I had, when I was 10 years old, so I had two brothers. My youngest brother, was 16 months old at the time. And so he was in the kitchen playing with the bottle of aspirin. That was prior to the time that Bayer had caps on the aspirin bottles. So he opened the aspirin and then he ate it. And my mom, being a Russian immigrant, she didn't really know what to do. And so she called the doctor and he told her, clearly didn't listen as far as I can tell, because he told her, put him to bed and see how he is in 2 hours. And so my mom, being, again, like this immigrant, is like, oh, they know so much here in America and I don't know anything kind of thing. She followed instructions. And of course, in 2 hours, he was violently ill. So then we went to a county hospital where they pumped his stomach, but he was still violently ill. And so we went to a variety, 3 hospitals actually, and they wouldn't take him because we didn't have proof of payment. And so the 4th hospital took him, but at that point he was too late and he died. So what this taught me was that, well, it's tragic, but it taught me as a 10-year-old child that no matter what the title of anybody was, I was not going to listen to them. I challenged all authority. And and I did that, and I didn't think to myself that I was doing it. No, little kids don't just think, oh, I'm going to do that. It just became part of me. And then I did that, I continued to do that, in my all along. And I think I taught this rebelliousness to my daughters because, of course, they heard the story. But I challenged everything. And again, I wasn't thinking that I was doing it, but when I first started teaching in 1984, I realized that the education system just didn't work. And so first year, I went along with it, but the second year, I didn't. And teachers get tenure after the second year, right? So this was not a very good thing to be a rebel and during the second year. And so I wasn't thinking, oh, I have to rebel or something. It was just like, I'm here and I'm with these kids all day long and they're not learning what they should be learning. So I'm going to do something different. And I'm going to stop this whole lecture method. I'm going to stop making them sit quietly in class all period long and not talk to each other. I'm going to make it collaborative. Back in the 1980s, collaborative learning was called cheating. So I was not popular with the other faculty members or with the administration.
But with the kids.
But the kids, oh my God. I started with 19 students in the class, and after the second year there were 30, and then the next year there were 40, and then within the next 6 years the class had grown to 70. It kept growing and growing, and the administration was like, what are you doing in that class? What are you giving them? And what I was giving them was freedom and respect for themselves and trust. And I didn't realize what I was doing at the time other than I knew what I was doing worked. And that I just wanted to continue doing it. And so I did. I had a lot of problems though because everybody was like, oh my God, they're so noisy in that class. They keep talking to each other all the time. My God, what is going on? But
one of your former students is here, by the way, Jessica Shambora.
Yeah. Oh, Jessica! So Jessica and her sister were in my class at different times, of course. But Jessica knows exactly what I'm talking about. Yes.
And there are now 700 students in your journalism program.
That's right. There are now 700 students. It's the largest program in the United States. And we have one newspaper. Jessica was on the paper at the Campanile. We have 7 different magazines, including a sports magazine, news magazine, arts and entertainment, History. Let's see. There's so many. I can hardly remember all these magazines that kids are creating.
And it's interesting because you talk about your experience as a child, later as a parent, and as an educator. It's not like we'll get to TRIC, which is the acronym that you came up with for your approach. But it's not like this was some premeditated strategy. How did you kind of pull from your childhood and various influences to come up with your approach with what worked?
Well, so again, it was back to this, I had to make sure that I thought it would work on my own. In other words, I had to verify.
You tested it on your kids.
I tested it, oh yeah. My 3 daughters, since I had a childhood I didn't want to repeat, I had these 3 kids and within 5 years. And I was like, so exciting, I have my own little guinea pigs here, I'll try it out. And so I tried out all these methods on them. And the number one thing I wanted, I just had one goal. And that one goal was I wanted them to be as independent as possible. That was it. And so my gut reaction was always, is this a way to empower them? Is this a way for them to feel good about themselves? So very early on, I'm talking about like 18 months old, they were already doing a lot of little things where they felt empowered. And then by the time they were 5 years old, for example, Anne was the butterfly champion for Northern California at the age of 5. Because I had taught swimming. I taught them all to swim when they were like 12 to 14 months old. Turns out little children can learn to swim. They don't do the Australian crawl like it looks like the Olympics or whatever, but they can learn to swim. So how did she, she felt really good about herself. She learned this stroke. It was amazing. I can just tell you though, nobody else in Northern California was teaching their child butterfly. So her competition was not so great. But still, she was super proud. And we have this picture of her standing there, with her little red swimsuit and her tummy sticking out, holding her big statue of winning this award. But they just were empowered early on because that was what I expected. I wanted them, in case anything ever happened, that they could think themselves out of any situation. And that's what they've done, and that's where they are.
Independence is one of the attributes, and TRIC, just to summarize, the book goes much more in depth, but trust, respect, independence, collaboration, and kindness. I'm curious, you mentioned in the book interest from companies, from corporations also in this approach, and you mentioned Google as an example, but talk about the relevance of this approach to business leaders, to any kind of leader, not just a parent or an educator.
Yeah, it's not just a parent or educator. So if you just think about trust, the number one thing that people want is trust and respect. That's what everybody wants. And that's what they want in the workplace too. So if you trust people, they will work really hard, especially if they're respected, because they're working because they don't ever want to lose your trust and respect. And it's the same with your children. So I did very little in terms of micromanaging my teenage daughters because we had this relationship of trust and respect all along. And Susan says, and so did Janet and Ann, they all say, but in the book, they say that they went to some kind of a seminar for parents and children, and they say that they were the only ones in there that said, we always tell our parents whatever we think. There is nothing, we're not hiding anything. We always talk to them like, they're like our friends. But I talked to my kids like they were adults from the time they were little. I explained things to them. I didn't do a lot of this baby talk that people do. But also in industry, I just see it. That's how I'm training my students. They work really hard because they know that I care and that they care and that I believe in them. And I do believe in them. And James Franco, the actor, was one of my students. And what he said in my first book, which is Moonshots in Education, he said basically that he believed in himself because I believed in him. So, I mean, that's what we can do. That is what we can do as parents. That's what we can do as teachers. And we need to change the whole education system. I can tell you one thing that I learned in School of Education. It's still happening today, by the way. I wish it weren't. When they train teachers, one of the things they teach you is don't smile till Christmas. I am not kidding. Why? Because they want a separation between the teacher and the students. They don't want you to be friends with your students. So there's many states, I don't know how many, maybe 10, who say that you cannot be friends with your students on Facebook. Are you aware of that? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because, you know, this is, all these laws have gone a little crazy because they're worried about predators. And I mean, there's some truth to that, but I mean, making everybody not be friends just because of a few people that are not doing the right thing.
Well, this is a kind of a weird segue to technology, but a segue nonetheless. So talk about the role, because you have very interesting takes, and obviously this is a topic of conversation in your own household. You know, two of your daughters run technology companies, and YouTube obviously has been in the news for all sorts of controversies most recently. But how does technology both, you know, what are the pros and cons today, whether it's parenting or you're leading your employees? You know, there are all these ways that technology can help you become so much more independent and start a company, and the barrier to entry is so much lower. At the same time, it's addictive, it's potentially destructive. Employers are spying on their employees, which doesn't seem
For sure.
So what's the good and the bad, and how do you see it?
So the good and the bad, I mean, the best part of technology is that you can look up anything online and you can find this information. Remember, before we had to go to the library. I spent a lot of time in the library. Today, I mean, I've got it in my pocket, right? I can find whatever I need. So that's the best thing. But what we need to do is teach our children how to use technology appropriately. In other words, it's restraint, self-restraint. You don't use a phone at dinner. You know, but also kids model after their parents, so you can't use it at dinner either, no matter how important that call is. I know it's hard. But that is really important. And in class, the rules of the class are, they're made up by the kids, actually. And they basically say, you know, whenever anyone's talking, you can't use the phone. And so you've never seen me in class ever tell the kids, put your phone down, because they do it by themselves, because they made up the rules. When they construct the rules, they follow them. So my idea is collaborative parenting. Have them work together with you. They need to understand what are the dangers of the tech and what sites are not good, what sites, you know, addictive, all this gaming stuff, which is useless. But how to use your phone for something other than that. And we can do it. We can all teach that. There's a website called Common Sense Media. Mm-hmm. I recommend it. It's really great. They recommend really good apps and movies and things that you can do with your child. But I'm against banning the phone. Mm-hmm. And the reason I'm against banning it is because they are going to go out in the world, and then they're going to have that phone. So if you can establish habits early on, and you can explain some of the things that are dangerous about the phone, I think they'll be better able to handle it when they're on their own. Because what you don't want to prepare the road for your child. You want to prepare your child for the road. And the road has a lot of dangers on it, and that's one of them. So that's my ideas about tech, and it works in class.
Yeah.
And it works at home.
Easier said than done. There's so much more that I wanted to get to, and this would have been a really nice place to ask you about the recent college admissions.
Oh, can I just say a last?
Real quick,
yes, real quick. Okay, so it's an anti-helicopter parenting book. That's what it is, against helicopter parenting. And the main reason is because the parents are doing their best to save and help their child. That's their motive, and I applaud that. But they're unfortunately doing just the opposite. They're disempowering their kids. And that scandal disempowered every single child that was impacted. So I'm sure those parents did not want to do that at all. But you just have to think of the more you do for your child, the less empowered they are, the less self-confident they are. And just think about it for yourself. The more things you know how to do, the better you feel about yourself.
Don't plan any summer camps. Just have him, just leave him at home. That's it. He's like 4,
Just
you know?
a few summer camps.
Yeah.
Maybe not every single day, maybe not every single week. You need a break too, you know, send them away for a while. But
Well, Esther, thank you so much. And please ask her for anecdotes over dinner. She's had a lot. Thank you.